Hi, welcome back to Chip's Woodshop for my second Shopsmith hack, the more stable table. I really love the Shopsmith because it lets me do all my woodworking in this corner of my garage, but one of the compromises in the design, especially with this particular older model table, is the compliance in the table. There's a fairly large distance between the table through the vertical tubes, the ways, to the motor, which means that there's more movement possible when you're trying to use it as a table saw or as a horizontal drill press or as a vertical drill press. So I've added a brace. First I'm going to give a demonstration of how much stiffness the brace adds to the table, and then I'm going to show you how I made it. Also, for details on how I've made the brace, step by step and with drawings and dimensions, look at the link in the video description below. So for me to do the demo, I'm going to use a weight and I'm going to apply a consistent force each time on the horizontal drill quill feed. So I've just added a couple of washers and a piece of pipe so that I can consistently apply that weight at a fixed distance from the pivot point, just for comparison, apples to apples. The weight I'm going to use is just an old brake, and you can see with the luggage scale, where you can trust me, that it weighs about 22 pounds, which is about 10 kilograms. First I'm going to demonstrate the stiffness of the table with and without the brace, without actually cutting anything, just for comparison. So I'm going to take my weight and I'm going to apply it to the quill feed, and we're going to see that we get about 20 thousandths, 21 thousandths of travel. That's half a millimeter. That's in the vertical direction, so we're pushing on the table, but because it's rocking back, it actually raises up half a millimeter, or 20 thou. So I'm going to show you the same situation. It's gone back down to about 0, but now I'm going to use the brace. So this is designed so that I can apply it by just tightening 2 nuts. Zeroing it out. You see that we get about 7 thousandths, which is a third or so of what we got with no brace at all. So you can see that it's able to reduce the amount of deflection that we get. Now that's kind of a lot of load, so I'm going to show you what it is when we're actually cutting something. In this case we're going to use, in the chuck I've got a 1/2 inch drill bit, which is about 13 millimeters. I'm just going to drill some holes in this piece of oak that I've got clamped onto the table. So we've still got the brace tightened up. Now if you're watching while it was going, it kind of moved around a little bit, but it never really got quite to 5 thousandths or 1/8 of a millimeter. Right now you can see that it's still deflected about 3 thousandths. So now I'm going to do the same thing without the brace. Let me just find another spot on my piece of oak. And I'm going to apply the same load and drill the same hole. After zeroing out my indicator. Now you see we got about 10 thousandths of vertical deflection, which is about 1/4 millimeter. And you see that it's still there after we drilled the hole, which means that that hole is actually 1/4 millimeter off the location where I originally wanted to put it. Same kind of effect occurs when you're trying to cut things with a table saw, but then the problem is because of deflection horizontally and saw cutting slightly wider, slightly narrower from one cut to the next. So this particular brace design gives you the stiffness that I was after, but it doesn't impede the use of all the different configurations of the Shopsmith. So to illustrate that, I'll just point out that at the moment I've got it in the horizontal drilling configuration as we had in the demo, but once I've loosened these two nuts, as I did at the end of the demonstration, you can see that I can raise the table, and I can also move the table back and forth. I can put it into the configuration, for example, that I might use for the table saw, or if I want to use it as a vertical drill press, I can easily flip the table 90 degrees, tighten it up. Let's see, I want to put it out there. But you can see that it gives you that stiffness even in the vertical orientation. The last Shopsmith hack video that I made showed how I use my Shopsmith to drill and tap holes, and the thing that I'm actually drilling and tapping in that video is this table. So if you look at the bottom of this old Mark V table, you can see that it has all these bosses where they gated the die cast table, and I've actually drilled and tapped a few of those holes so that I could put this bracket on. Bracket's made of two pieces. There's a piece of slotted angle iron that I cut and bent into this U shape, and then there's also a metal plate which I salvaged from a piece of furniture, a steel plate, and that gets me from a couple of holes that I've drilled and tapped in the center, and gives me a couple of holes that I need out on the side to attach this top bracket. So the strut that goes down to this clamp at the bottom is just a couple of pieces of poplar separated by a couple of pieces of plywood at each end. That makes this long slot, which allows the motion of the brace when you're changing configurations or moving the table position. And this clamp at the bottom is made of a few pieces of 2x4 that were cut, and it's threaded along this piece of threaded rod, kind of like a string of pearls, and that threaded rod also goes through this slot. There's another piece of threaded rod at the top, and then I've put a piece of scrap metal and a nut as a flag on the back, essentially to allow me to tighten just from one side. And on the clamp at the bottom, I used a T-nut and a 1/4 20 nut to keep the threaded rod from turning, so I can just tighten it up with a nut on one side. So if you want, you can, instead of regular nuts like these, you could use wing nuts, which works fine. It's hard to get as much torque on a wing nut, which is why I prefer to use regular nuts. But if you wanted to just be able to tighten it with your hand, of course, you could use a wing nut. And the other thing is, if you don't need to stiffen up the table for a particular task that you're doing, you can just leave it loose and it will follow the table around wherever you put it. And then it's always there when you need it, but it stays out of the way when you don't. So I found it convenient. Up to this point, I've used it as table saw, horizontal drill, vertical drill, disc sander. I've used it with my attachments like the band saw and the joiner. And I haven't yet found a situation where this brace in this configuration was really in the way. So it's been very helpful, and especially when I'm working on small pieces where I want to get a really precise, repeatable cut. Again, if you want the details about how I've made this, look in the video description for this video below and find the link to the Instructables website there. If you like this style of step-by-step instruction, please share and subscribe so you'll be notified when I post more. If you have questions, please post them in the comments. Read about more of my woodworking projects and tools at chipswoodshop.com.